Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the WAPPP Annual Congress. I'm delighted that you could join us. Malcolm X said, "The future belongs to those who prepare for it today." Boy, do we all have our work cut out for us on the climate change front, and we have so little time to get it done before the future chastises us for failing at the task. Well, we have a very busy schedule ahead of us over the next 5 days, and hopefully a fruitful one. It includes more than 50 panels and presentations. A week-long event such as this one, packed with sessions and other activities, cannot be realized without the immense dedication of a truly professional team. Today, instead of leaving the thank you notes till the end of my remarks, as is customary, please allow me to reverse the traditional order of things, because when the task at hand is so huge and the team attempting it so small, appreciation cannot wait till the end of one's remarks and be diminished in a trailing afterthought. I wish to thank upfront all the members of the WAPPP Executive and Steering Committees who have generously and freely contributed their hard work to this event. But I especially wish to recognize and give exceptional thanks to our dynamic and tireless Executive Director, Jean-Christophe Barthes, to two amazing members of our Executive Committee, Jyoti Bisbee and Jinan Ghosh, and to our START Fellows, Chandra Gunaratne and Sadia Riyal. Our tiny team has taken on and executed what entire companies are usually hired to do. This Congress could not have been possible without it. Much appreciation goes to our lead sponsors, ISRC and Ansarada, to our partner and sponsor, LTIA, to our other sponsors, Oracle, K-Infra, APMG, and Institut Cerda. And many thanks also to the World Bank Group, the Asian Development Bank, the GI Hub, and the UN Regional Commissions for organizing highly interesting sessions. This is the second year that we hold our annual Congress in virtual format. Of course, many of us, like me, enjoy the personal contact of in-person conferences, but things have changed, and there are many reasons for us to hold our conference virtually. First, a truly global organization like ours needs to allow all its members from all time zones, including those who cannot afford to travel, to partake in its proceedings. Second, the metaverse is coming, and it is coming fast, so we all had better get used to it. Third, modern conferencing software such as the AirMeet platform we are using have all the functionalities of meeting and greeting and networking and exchanging information that in-person conferences offer. On that note, I wish to remind everyone here that our event is not a series of Zoom calls. It is truly a virtual conference designed to help you network and find profit and career opportunities. WAPPP is all about global networking, and the out-of-session areas of the AirMeet platform are excellent places for that. And finally, fourth but not least, would it really have made sense for us to hold a conference about climate change, yet have hundreds of people fly around the globe burning fossil fuels and contributing to global warming? In August 2002, Grenville Byford wrote an article in Foreign Affairs magazine in which he said, and I paraphrase, "You can win wars against proper nouns like Germany, Japan, or Saddam Hussein, but wars against common nouns like poverty, drugs, or terrorism are less successful." He didn't mention global warming, of course, but global warming falls in the category of common noun. So knowing this, knowing that temperatures continue to creep upwards, knowing that natural disasters are multiplying around the globe, knowing that despite all the conferences and speeches, the leading 50 economies have yet to make good on more than 80% of the funding they promised to deploy to combat climate change, knowing that the world has suddenly become more geopolitically uncertain, knowing that the rise in food prices threatens a rise in social unrest as it has done many times in the past, knowing that higher interest rates threaten the flow of capital from developed economies to emerging markets, and knowing that governments all over the world are struggling with budget deficits and historically high levels of indebtedness that threaten their economies as well as the well-being of their future generations. What hope do we have of winning this war on climate change? And what role could public-private partnerships possibly play in this regard? I don't know if we will win the war, but I know that PPPs can surprisingly contribute a whole lot to improving our chances of winning it, And I guess this is what our conference is all about. To start with, let's remember that infrastructure is responsible for 79% of all greenhouse gas emissions and 88% of all adaptation costs, according to a recent report published by UNOPS, UNEP, and the University of Oxford. While the share of infrastructure financed by the private sector is small overall, there are countries and sectors where private investment dominates. And in places and sectors where it doesn't, there are intensifying calls for it to do so. Therefore, public-private partnership can play an increasingly important role in fighting climate change. Second, it doesn't matter how big or small the role that you or me or anyone plays in combating the causes and effects of climate change. It is a global problem after all. What matters is that everyone does their bit, and the bit of the private sector investment in infrastructure can be quite a bit. Third, as I have been saying for years, we should stop thinking of PPP as a tool for public procurement and start thinking of PPP as a tool for development. Not a tool that simply integrates value for money, which it should, but a tool which is itself integrated in the SDGs as SDG number 17. With this frame of mind, we can start contemplating smaller scale PPPs at the local level and even at the personal level. For what is a feed-in tariff for solar energy sold by an individual to the national grid other than a tiny power purchase agreement after all? Well, okay, perhaps I'm exaggerating to make a point, but the point remains that with properly structured programs, following the example of IFC's Scaling Solar initiative, PPP can deliver thousands of projects at once. To combat climate change, we need more than the odd PPP project by a central authority from time to time. We need to engage on a local, massive scale. Replicability is key. Raising awareness aside, it is project by project that we will start taming the causes and effects of climate change. Not cynical argument by cynical argument, not wishful thinking by wishful thinking, not conference by in-person conference, project by project. And yes, PPP project by PPP project. There are today 4 general hurdles in the way of that, hurdles we must combat. First is the antagonism to PPP, which is found in many places around the world. This ranges from people suspecting that PPP is a tool to enrich the elites, to others convinced that it is a full-fledged conspiracy to destroy their society. Unfortunately, this negativity applies especially to the water sector, where people fear that a free natural resource might be exploited for a rich man's profit. A sector that requires 54% of all future climate adaptation spend to go to it cannot be ignored by us. A major effort needs to be undertaken to combat this populist negativity, and this requires a major awareness raising campaigns. But I digress. Water or no water, antagonism to PPP in general needs to be fought by us, the PPP community, by ensuring transparency, by exposing corruption, and by applying modern best practices in project design, tendering, and implementation. We must apply ESG standards, not by name only like some Wall Street greenwashing banks do, not as measurement of a risk affecting cash flows as rating agencies do, but as a responsibility incumbent on us by our commitment to the SDGs. The second general hurdle are the political decision makers everywhere, but especially in emerging markets. We cannot afford for long having countries enact PPP legislation, establish PPP units, get their staff CP3P certified, only for the whole construct to be ignored or sometimes even fought by political decision makers. Our PPP community must work hard to raise awareness of PPP best practices among politicians, while also insisting that PPP units, not political motives, be empowered to drive PPP programs. The third general hurdle is that of restricting the PPP field to private for-profit players, instead of actively opening it up to private not-for-profit NGOs. Many of you have heard me campaign for this over the past several years. It is imperative that our PPP community learn from the experience of certain countries, including my own, Lebanon, on how to bring civil society and philanthropy into the PPP fold. And we have a session on philanthropy in this event, as well as we have sessions on water and on airport fuel and many things. This will not only increase the number of projects, especially climate-related ones, delivered through PPP, but will also help expand the social support base for PPP in many societies. I have called and continue to call on the multilateral development banks to not restrict their lending to governments and for-profit companies, and to start actively lending to NGOs that demonstrate good and sustainable business models. The fourth general rule, which is now creeping up, is that of the current global circumstances of geopolitical instability, rising inflation, and high interest rates. Faced with an ever-growing need for either new infrastructure or for maintaining existing infrastructure, and having contracted very high levels of public indebtedness, governments are now seeking private sector investment through PPP more than they ever did before. The problem is that private sector investors, contemplating the same dire circumstances I mentioned, are more reluctant than ever to commit financing, especially to projects in emerging markets, where risks are often perceived to be higher. This situation requires a greater engagement by governments and by the MDBs to give comfort to investors. Governments need to accept more flexible PPP contracts. MDBs need to lend less and guarantee more. They may even need to adjust their approach to middle-income countries and help them with IDA-type assistance through grants and concessional financing when it comes to funding the additional cost of climate change-related mitigation and adaptation measures. There is potentially a bright spot ahead, and that is in the field of technology. We are seeing an ever greater use of more climate-friendly materials for construction and designs for green buildings. We are seeing crowdfunding for nature preservation. We are seeing many initiatives crop up on Web3 using blockchain and distributed ledger technologies aimed at making the carbon credit trade more efficient. One of our sessions has something on this aspect. Some are being implemented on a PPP basis. There is a promise of even more efficient platforms coming up. The same way that governments improvise PPP projects to deal with the COVID pandemic and deliver vaccines can be used to improvise PPP projects and drive some of the creativity, which is being applied to deliver the luxury of driverless cars when there are millions of drivers looking for work around the world. We need to drive some of that creativity to focus on climate change solutions. Now, in less than 4 years, WAPP has grown to be the premier PPP hub in the world. We are extremely proud of this achievement, and we owe much of it to you, our members, who participate in and animate all our wonderful events and activities. We are doing our bit on the climate change front. We have made it a priority for all our programs this year, and we are doing all we can to raise awareness and incite positive action. The future belongs to those who prepare for it. Malcolm X was not wrong. It takes a long time to design and build infrastructure, and once it's built, it will hopefully stay there for a long time. This being the case, it is important for us to ask, what future do we want to leave behind for the next generation? How does the daily work of each one of us contribute to creating a better, brighter world? It is not a magic wand, nor a global pact that is going to save our planet for us and for our children. It is each one of us. And if we happen to be members of the PPP community, I will add this: it is one good PPP project at a time. Thank you very much for listening to me today. And now for the rest of our event, please continue to the next session. Thank you very much.